The Russian military held major war games demonstrations in Belarus Monday. This is just days after being accused of violating NATO's airspace for the second time in less than a week. NATO officials say that Polish fighter jets shooting down Russian drones last week was the first time alliance fighters have ever had to intercept enemy targets over NATO airspace. And now, fears of a larger European conflict are growing after Romania reported a Russian drone in its airspace just on the weekend. So joining us this morning for what this means is Alexander Linoshka, Associate Professor of International Relations at the University of Waterloo. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me back.
As a reminder to our viewers, there are currently 32 member countries in NATO. Ukraine and Belarus are not among them. Some experts are saying that Putin is testing NATO with these incursions. What do you think Russia's trying to accomplish? What's the end game here?
I think the most likely explanation is that Russia is testing. It certainly has accepted some risk that its drones or other aerial assets would penetrate and make incursions into NATO airspace. This has happened before, since the full-scale invasion began in 2022. However, the drone swarm that penetrated Polish airspace was indeed engaged by Dutch fighter jets, and it was the first of the sort, as you mentioned, whereby NATO aircraft had to engage with Russian assets. And so this is not an accident, or if it is an accident, it's an accident done in a situation where Russia has accepted the risk of this sort of accident taking place.
Yeah, and not just engaged with, there weren't warnings sent, they were shot down. So in response to the drones last Wednesday, Poland since invoked Article 4, we know, of the NATO treaty. And a reminder, this is what prompts formal discussions between alliance members. And if we can throw that map back up, just a reminder, the reason that this war in Ukraine is also so concerning to the rest of the NATO countries, it really is the breakwater between Russia and that portion of Europe. So Romania's military has been criticized for not shooting down the drone over its airspace on the weekend. They didn't take the route of Poland. What do you think of these NATO responses so far?
Well, the NATO response so far has been the announcement of a new mission called Eastern Sentry, and this mission involves the deployment of 2 Danish F-16s, as well as an anti-air warfare frigate, 3 Rafale from France, 4 Eurofighters from Germany, all of which serve to complement F-35s that are already dispatched to the area from Italy and the Netherlands. I think there's been additional conversation about the scope of the sanctions, and for all the criticisms that the Trump administration has received for its handling of this particular file, one thing it has gone right is pointing out that European countries unfortunately still buy Russian oil and gas, and thus indirectly finance the Russian war effort. And so that is now on the table, and I think between Eastern Sentry and doubling down on those particular sanctions, that could be very well an effective response, albeit one that'll be done over the medium term, not so much necessarily in the short term.
Alexander, if the very end of this discussion would be a declaration of war, where are we at, and how do you think NATO should be responding to these breaches?
Well, so the argument people have made is that Putin is testing air defenses that NATO have, and I think that may be right, but we can also learn from this particular experience too. I think the incursion has demonstrated that there are certain gaps in our capabilities, certain issues that relate to our readiness and our preparedness, and so I think there's an opportunity here to learn from this particular experience and to do better next time for when a possible incursion might also take place.
How likely is it that these incursions lead to a wider European war? And when you look at the actions of the NATO countries, where do you place their concern level?
Well, there's variation across NATO members. I do not necessarily think that these actions would lead to war. I think, if anything, Russia is trying to engage in activities that fall far short of any known threshold for war agreed upon, at least tacitly, between the two sides. It will probe, it will go about the sort of sabotage that has already been undertaking across the European continent. All of these serve to unsettle, to maybe intimidate, to punish certain European backers for their support for Ukraine, but Russia has no interest in fighting a war with NATO, and so NATO should probably use that insight so as to be a little more confident in how it responds to these sorts of provocations.
Alexander Linoshka with the University of Waterloo. Great conversation this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.